My interest in egg tempera painting started a few years ago when a colleague of mine, Lynette Bosch, approached me with the idea of helping her in a research project. And my role in the research project would be to identify the historic colors that Renaissance and Mannerist artists used in paintings. So toward this end, she got the idea that maybe we should go down to New York and study with this egg tempera artist that she knew, because egg tempera is, the signature medium of the Renaissance. So we decided if we went down and took the class from her, we would know more about it, and the identification of the colors would be a lot easier. So we did, and on the way back, my wife went down with us for the first weekend, and on the way back in the car, Lynette was saying, well, what are you going to do with this technique? You might be able to use this in your paintings. And I had been thinking about it, and I didn't quite know where I was going to go with it. And then my wife came up with the idea that, well, why don't you do saints and demons and do your friends and enemies as subjects of paintings? And then Lynette came up with the idea, well, why don't you put them in Renaissance paintings and put it in a contemporary context? So that was a really good idea. So we went off on that tangent and started out doing friends and as either good or enemies as either good or bad. And then I also then it evolved into taking a stand on issues that confront society today. This was one of the early paintings I did in the Saints and Demons series. As you can see, it's a small egg tempera painting, about 8 inches by 12 inches. And I got the idea to put these in boxes because, one, it would kind of increase the meaning of the picture, and at the same time give it more of a presence, so when it hung on a wall, it wouldn't get swallowed up and lost. The background is actually from Renzo Lotto's Annunciation. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to put this into a contemporary context. So I had a model pose with a vacuum cleaner, which kind of asked the question, did Mary really... Mary wasn't really asked about this. It wasn't her decision. I incorporated these curtains here as censor curtains. So if people didn't want to see this whole unsightly look at this unsightly idea, then they could just kind of pull the string and the whole thing would be censored. The Saints and Demons series evolved into the Italian American series when I started doing paintings of my relatives. And in particular, I started out with a picture of my grandmother. This is the first painting in the Italian American series. It's based on a photograph that I took of my grandmother in Thanksgiving when she was about 97. And this particular day she was reminiscing about the old days and making a point about something. And you can see that she has a rosary in her hand, and she has this really intense look that Italian grandmothers have. So what I decided to do was, I took this painting by Cosimo Tura, which deals with this really strange background with these dolphins that have teeth on it. It's really kind of a scary looking background. But sometimes my grandmother was kind of scary. So I tried to get the whole idea of, one, the likeness of the way she looked, the likeness of her, but also to give something about her personality, so that when you looked at this picture, you would kind of feel what it was like to have a grandmother like this. So what I did was I actually glued these pearls and this crucifix on it, because she always had a crucifix in her hand, always had a rosary in her hand, so that she was always praying. She was very religious. I stuck her in a box that looked like a church, and in it I put all these little relics. St. Catherine over here, and the Blessed Mother, which is who she always prayed to. Always prayed to the Blessed Mother, and St. Christopher, because she never believed that St. Christopher never was. She always, every car we had a St. Christopher medal in it. Her whole life revolved around religion. But at the same time, I wanted to get the feeling of the hard life she lived. You can see all the wrinkles in her face, and as I saw that, one of the really neat things about egg tempera is, if you can look at her hand, it actually looks like there's skin across bones. So you're able to get this really neat effect. And I put doors on this because if you have a grandmother like this, you know that there's a time when you want to leave. So in this particular case, when you get tired of visiting Grandma, you can just close the door and you won't have to talk to her anymore. This is a portrait of my grandmother's youngest brother. He'd be my Uncle Cosmo. He was known to his friends as Moxie Barone. And he led a very interesting life, and he's a very charismatic person. He was a maitre d'. He worked in Reno back in the late 40s in the casinos. He was married a couple times and divorced. And he had a lot of girlfriends along the way. So the photograph that I am basing this on was one that was taken, I think, in the late 1940s when he was a young man. And you can see how dapper he looks. He always dressed impeccably. He was the funniest stories you ever heard. But I'm sure my grandmother wasn't pleased with his life because he enjoyed it to the fullest, as you can see with the nude in the back, which represents a lot of his girlfriends, and the showgirls, which I'm sure that he was all around in Reno. I even put a little bit of Reno in the background there. And the top part is from a painting by Mantegna, which has some angels with crucifixes and crosses on top of a cloud, and then there's this army of God leaving the city. And this represents my grandmother and the way he was brought up and to be a very good Catholic man. But along the way, he kind of strayed away from the path of God, and the way my grandmother's life was lived. You can see the contrast from what my grandmother's painting is like in this one. This is all deals with hedonistic things, and my grandmother's portrait deal with all things religious. This is I had a whole lot of fun doing this, obviously, because it visually it's a very rich picture. One of the nice things about painting that maybe people who aren't painters just don't quite get the same experiences. But as I was looking at this black and white photograph, I had to figure out what the colors were, and I realized that he had a straw hat on, and that the tie and the headband were about the same value. So I thought there was going to be a nice red color, and red has been symbolized a lot of different ways. Back in Renaissance time, it was the color of God and the royalty, and only the very rich and popes and cardinals wore red. But as it's come down to the 20th and the 21st century, it has other connotations of things that aren't so pure, like it has to deal with passion and sins of passion. So I think it's a kind of appropriate color, because back in here there are the agents of God have the same red, but now the cultural interpretation of the color has changed. And I also wanted to. It was real fun painting the showgirls with the real bright colors and all the little beads and stuff. And so when I got through showing this, painting the picture, and I showed it to some of my cousins who had also known Uncle Cosmo, they said I totally captured what he was like and the life he lived. This painting is based on a photograph of my father. It was taken right after World War II, right just when he was discharged, I believe. And in it you can see he's in his uniform with all his medals and his rank, so on. And he was only 24 when this picture was taken. And as I was painting this, I came to this realization that a 24-year-old shouldn't have to gone through what he went through. He was in World War II, and he was in the Battle of Monte Cassino as one of a few survivors in this battle. And so you can see he was awarded a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart. He was an alcoholic for as long as I can remember, and then became a religious fanatic toward the end of his life. And it was the only way I think he could escape the horrors of what he saw. He became such a total pacifist after his experiences there. And this was a war that was fought for a real reason. And you hate to think that all the people that are dying in Iraq are dying for nothing. So I got the idea to do this painting. It's kind of like an anti-war statement. And it's a homage as a painting that was homage to him and all he endured. So what I did was I got this painting by Luca Signorelli. It's his Last Judgment fresco. In it there are devils that are grabbing people, they're torturing them, and then way over here they're throwing them into fiery furnace of hell. So this this to me represented his psychological trauma, all the stuff that he endured. At the same time, it was in the same vein of doing the Italian, of combining, appropriating an image from the Renaissance to a contemporary image. I was driving one day, and it was almost to the day when he was in battle. The sunrise came up right near my house. I happened to have a camera with me, and I took it. And as the sun came up, you can't tell if it's a dove of peace or an atomic bomb explosion. And so in it we have this beautiful sunrise and this very ambiguous symbol in the middle. So after I got through with the painting, I started thinking that it just didn't have enough in it. It didn't have enough symbolism in it, and it just didn't go on to say what I wanted to say in the picture. So I incorporated this old box from this old barnwood that my brother-in-law had, who, by the way, makes all these boxes for me. This is and I finished it so that it had a real rough, weathered finish. And I got the idea to actually put his medals into the top there. That kind of symbolized the fact that these were things he earned, but then through the years, they were just kind of thrown in a drawer and forgotten. Even though these were testaments to his bravery, it's still, through the years, it really just doesn't, all they are is they're just symbols. So what I try to do is to increase the meaning of this whole image by incorporating pawns across the bottom and these little toy soldiers from World War II. This kind of signify the fact that he was nothing but a pawn in the war, just like all people are. When they get in the military and they go to a battle, you have to do what the superior officers tell you to do, whether you're going to die or not. And at the top, these chess pieces symbolize the generals and the people who were given the orders. As I was painting the picture, I became very moved by this. And my father would never really talk about his war experiences. And by painting the images in the background with all the demons that represented his psychological state of mind, the explosion in the bottom, and the whole thing, what I remember him, it just came down to the it's still pretty emotional just talking about this.